Okay, my friends, Boker Tov, we're on the bottom of 117b at the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is discussing a case where, you had the page. Yeah. Achat omeret mate, achat omeret lo mate. If two co-wives come back and they testify about about their husbands, about their same man. One says he's dead, the other one says he's not dead. Zusha omeret mace, the one who says he's dead, well, we believe her. Tinase, she could get married. Vitito ksuvasa, and she could take her ktuba. Vizusha omeret slomes, the one who says he's not dead, lo tinase, she can't get married. Veloti talk suvasa. She can't get married and she can't take her ksuba. So the one who says he's dead, she can remarry. And the one who says he's not dead, she can't remarry. So basically, two separate laws were in the same marriage. Let's say one says he died in his sleep and the other one says, he was murdered. Then Rabbi Meir Omer since they're contradicting each other, Meir says since they're contradicting each other, they can't remarry. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Omrim, Hol v'zu modos she'en kayam yinasu. So Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon say, since they both agree that he's not alive, they can get married. Third case, Eid Omer Meis, Eid Omer Lo Meis. They have two witnesses. One witness comes and says he's dead, and the other one says he's not dead. On the top of 118a. Isha Omeres Meis. We're on top of 118a. One woman says he's dead. The Isha Omeres Lo Meis, and another woman says he's not dead. Arezu Lo Tinase. Now we're saying that he can't get married. That Arezu Lo Tinase. And under these circumstances, she can't get married. So the Gemara explains, Timer de Amra Lo Meis. So the reason why she can't get married is because he didn't die. Timer de Amra Lo Meis. What's the reason why she can't remarry in the first case is because she says her husband didn't die. Hayashtika, which implies that if she would have been quiet, Tinase, she'd be able to get married. But why? Why would she be able to be married on the basis of her husband's testimony? On the basis of her co-wife's testimony. We have a principle that one co-wife cannot testify about her friend. So the Gemara says, lo mace, it's trichalei. No, we need it for a case of lo mace. We need it for a case where she says he didn't die. Salka daita chamina, you might have thought that even though she says he didn't die, ironically, Armayas, he's really dead. And the only reason why she says he didn't die is to mess up her co-wife. It's just to mess up her co-wife. That's the only reason why she says he didn't die. And she's really trying to fall on her sword with the Philistines, to borrow the expression from Samson, in order to mess up her co-wife. And that's the only reason why she said it. And then actually she really can remarry. So Kamash, we see from here, though it's not the case, that she can't actually remarry. That's not the case, that she's really not allowed to remarry. So the Gemara says, Achas Omeres Mace. So if one says he's dead and the other wife says he was murdered, her mayor says that she's not allowed to remarry because they're contradicting each other. And Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon say she can because they both say he's dead. One co-wife says he's dead, and the other co-wife says he was murdered. So our mayor says that that's not enough, that they're contradicting each other, so they can't remarry because they don't have the same story. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say, well, they both say he's dead, so they can remarry. So the Gemara says, well, Lifog Rabbi Meir Bereisha, why doesn't Rabbi Meir argue also in the first case? In the first case, where one says he's dead and the other one says he's alive, Rabbi Meir should argue in that case too. Gemara says, you're right. The first case is the position, Rabbi Meir doesn't agree with it. The first case is the position of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon arguing with Rabbi Meir. It's indeed the case. It's exactly the case. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afilu tema Rabbi Meir. You can even say the first case is Rabbi Meir, baha afilu Rabbi Meir moda. That in the case where one says he's dead and the other one says he's not dead, even there Rabbi Meir would admit that the first one could remarry. To call lo meis beidus isha avakashi, because it's not really a contradiction to say he's not dead. It's a bigger contradiction to say he died in a different way. The way I was thinking about this, I didn't see this in the commentaries. The way I was thinking about this, to say he's not dead is not really a contradiction to the witness who says he's dead. It's just an argument from, I never saw him dead. It's not really a contradiction, because you could have always said he died, and then you could always say I saw him die after he saw him alive. So it's not really a complete contradiction. Rashi says differently. Obviously, we go with Rashi over me. Obviously, it doesn't even need to be said. But Rashi's logic is that because they believe the first one, then the second one's not even a question anymore. So that's like saying that once the first one became the rule, you don't even go to the second one. So the Gemara says, Tanan, we learned 8 Omer Mace, 8 Omer Lo Mace. If one witness says he's dead, and the other, this is the third case of our Mishnah, if one says he's dead, and the other one says he's not dead, Isha Omeres Mace, Isha Omeres Lo Mace, one woman says he's not dead, and one woman says he's dead, Arezu Lo Tinase. Then she's not allowed to remarry. So Bishlama Rebbe Elazar makes sense according to Rabbi Elazar, who says, stomach Rabbi Meir, who says that the anonymous case at the beginning was that what you were saying now is like Rabbi Meir. That Rabbi Meir says that if one witness says he's dead and one says he's not, that he can't remarry. And we're saying that the anonymous is like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says in that case, Rabbi Meir would agree, it's a difficulty. Well, Rabbi Yochanan Kasha, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's difficult. Gemara explains, yes, indeed, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it is he has a problem with the third part of our Mishnah. Indeed, that's the case. So the Gemara now says the next Mishnah. You have the place here? No, we're now going to do the next Mishnah. Okay, so the next Mishnah states, Haisha Shahalcha Hiu Ba'al Medina Sayam. A woman goes with her. She goes with her husband overseas, Uba Amra, and she comes home and she says, Meis Bali, and she comes home and she says, my husband is dead. Tinase v'titok ksuvasa. She can get married and take her ksuba, vitzarasa asura, but her co-wife is prohibited to remarry. Because we already said a co-wife can't remarry on the basis of her co-wife's testimony because we're concerned she's trying to mess her up. So she can remarry, but her co-wife cannot. And even so, let's say she was a daughter of an Israelite married to a Kohen, and now she comes home and says, my husband is dead. So then the co-wife not only cannot remarry, the co-wife can assume she's still married to the Kohen until Chol B'Truma. The co-wife can still eat it from the Truma.
In the first case, when she said she comes back from the trip, she says,
speak loudly so they can hear you.
In the first case, she says, comes back from the trip, and she says, my husband's dead, and the co-wife can't remarry because the statement of the first wife could be messing up the co-wife.
Yeah, exactly.
But the statement of the first wife would also mess up herself.
Yeah, but we just said, but we're not concerned about that for two reasons. One, we just said, Tamus nafshim plishtim. She's like, I'm ready to hurt myself to hurt somebody else. And also, it's only a problem. She's only messing up herself if she remarries. But if the co-wife goes and remarries, then the co-wife is messed up before she was messed up. So it's not enough. The co-wife has never believed about her testimony. And it's really one case, because not only is the co-wife not believed, but even more so, the co-wife could continue to eat the truma as though she's married to a Kohen. So the Gemara says that's the position of Rabbi Tarfon, which Rabbi Kiva says, Ein zu derech motziasa midei aver. This is not the way to take her out of a sin. What do you need to do? Ad shetei asura linasei v'asura milecho b'truma. So Rabbi Akiva says, no, the co-wife is prohibited to marry, but she's also prohibited to continue eating the truma. She has both prohibitions because we're not sure that the co-wife is alive. We're not sure that her co-wife is alive. So that her husband was alive. Next case, Amra Meis Bali V'achkach Meis Chami. She says, my husband died, and then my father-in-law died. Meaning to say, she's not allowed to testify about her mother-in-law, but in this case, by the time she testifies about her mother-in-law, she's no longer her mother-in-law. So she says, my husband died, and then my father-in-law died. So she gets to remarry and take her ksuba. But her mother-in-law is not able to rely upon her testimony. So the mother-in-law can't believe that her husband died, and the mother-in-law is prohibited to remarry. And if her mother-in-law was married to a Kohen, she could continue to eat from the truma. That's the position of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Ein tu derech motzia midei avera. Rabbi Kiva says, this is not the way we take out a woman from sin. Ein tu derech motzia midei avera. Ad shetei asur linaseh v'asur milachol b'truma. So Rabbi Akiva says, no, the mother-in-law is prohibited to remarry until she knows for sure her husband's dead. But at the same time, she's not going to be allowed to eat from the truma. Meaning to say, we're going to be very strict with the mother-in-law, just like we're strict with the co-wife and the mother-in-law in both cases. So the Gemara asks the question, which it often asks in situations like this. The Gemara asks the question, why do we need both cases? Why do we need the case where she testifies about her co-wife, and why do we need the case where she testifies about her mother-in-law? Both cases, it's basically the same principle, and it's the same dispute that Rabbi Tarfon says the co-wife cannot remarry, but she can eat the truma. And Rabbi Kiva says the mother-in-law and then Rabbi Kiva says that the mother-in-law and the co-wife cannot eat the truma. So it's tzricha. The Gemara says we need both cases. The Yidmar Achkamaisa. If we just had the first case, the case where the co-wife where she testifies about her husband, and we say the co-wife cannot remarry and cannot eat the truma, I would say, but how come Rabbi Tarfon? In that case, Rabbi Tarfon says that the co-wife completely believe her and cannot believe her at all and continue to eat the truma. Mishum detzara de gufa, because the co-wife, they feel from the other one pain in the body. She's like, my body's not getting it's full enjoyment because of my co-wife. She's impacting my physical pleasure. But the mother-in-law, they're just annoying each other, but it's not physical deprivation. Maybe you would agree with Rabbi Akiva that the hatred is not enough to allow her to continue to eat the truma. And if you just had the case of the co-wife, I would say in the case of the co-wife, Rabbi Akiva. In that case of the co-wife, Rabbi Akiva says. In that case of the co-wife, Rabbi Akiva says. In that case of the mother-in-law, Rabbi Akiva says she can't eat the truma. But in the case of the co-wife, you might agree with Rabbi Tarfon. So therefore, you need both cases. Tzricha. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Alachik Rabbi Tarfon. The law is like Rabbi Tarfon. Means to say that the co-wife and the mother-in-law can eat from the truma. So the Gemara says, Amar Baya Afanan Nami Tanina. We have a brayso that teaches us. It says, Nitali Ben Medina Sayam. Let's say she says, excuse me. So he says, Abai says we have a Mishnah that teaches us this. Because it says, Nitali Ben Medina Sayam. She goes overseas and she says, guess what? When I went overseas with my husband, I had a son, but then the son died. And then after the son died, Rakach Bali, and then my husband died. So I fought to Yibam. But she never had to tell us that she had a son. Then she's believed. But Bali, Vakach, Bini. But if she says, my husband died, and then my son died, in an menace. We don't believe her because in that case, she's saying, I don't fall to Yibam. But when she left, she had the presumptive status that she was going to fall to Yibam. So we don't believe her to say she doesn't fall to Yibam. And she has to do chalitza. We require her to do chalitza. So the Gemara says, "L'dvareu dechoshishin." That proves that we're concerned about her words. Divrei tzara and choshim, but we don't believe her co-wife. So if her co-wife would say that, she wouldn't even require. We wouldn't believe her at all, and she would even be allowed to do yibum under those circumstances. Shema mina.
If she says it one way or she says it the other way?
Well, because what's the difference if she says it one way or the other way? We'll see this mission on Hamabeit, but the difference is when she leaves, her presumptive status is that she falls to yibum. So in one case, they're just supporting the presumptive status. In the other case, they're changing the presumptive status. We'll see when we do the Mishnah. Rashi explains she's not believed. Why? We don't allow her to marry somebody without chalitza. Why? When the rabbis believed a woman about her husband, they knew the daiko mitzvah. They believe her because they say she's going to investigate. But they didn't extend it to say she no longer requires yibum or mnua, the zimn and the sanule, because there maybe she hates the yavam. So we won't believe her.
How do you discern on that from the order of the sequence?
No, because it depends if she's supporting the presumptive status or not. In the first case, she said, I had a son, and then he died, so now, and my husband's died, so now I fall to yibum. So we're being strict. She said requires either, we say she does chalitza. But in the second case, she says, my husband died, and then my son died, so I don't have to do yibum or chalitza. We don't believe her in that case.
She doesn't think you're worried that maybe she's just trying to get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. She's just trying to get out of doing yibum with her husband. So now the next case states as follows with her brother-in-law. Top of 118b, the Mishnah states, Kidesh achas michamesh nashim. Let's say a man betroths one of 5 women. The ein yodeya, and we don't know Ezu Kidesh, which one he betrothed. Ko achas omeres, each one says, Osi Kidesh, each one says, he betrothed me. No singel ko achas v'achas. He has to give a divorce to every single one. Umeniach ksuba b'neihen. And he places a ksuba amongst them. Umistalik. So he puts the money amongst them all and he leaves. He stays with the court. Stays with the court. The court. And he leaves it with the court. The Gemara Bamatzia says he takes the money until they can clarify who he has to give it to. But the Mishnah seems to say he puts it with them and then he leaves.
He doesn't have to give a separate.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't have to give a separate one according to this position, because nobody has a strong claim to say that they are entitled to it. But that's the position of Rabbi Tarfon. But Rabbi Akiva says, "Ein zo derech motzia midei avera." No, that's not how you get her out of a sin. How you get him out of a sin. Actually, you can get uksuba kol achas v'achas. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon say, give a get or a ksuba to every single one. You have to give each one a divorce and each one a ksuba. Gazel echad mechamisha ve'en yudia me'eze gazel. Let's say you robbed from 5 people, and you don't know from which one you robbed. Ko echad omer osi gazel, and each one says he robbed from me. Meniach gazela b'neihen u'mistalik. You put the theft amongst them, and then you depart. You put the thing you stole, you leave it with the court, and then you leave. That's what Rabbi Tarfon says. Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva says they have to pay each one back the money.
So this is until there's a judicial decision.
Yeah.
Decision.
Well, they can't prove it. If they can prove it, then it's not a case. You can't. There's never going to be a decision. You won't know who it is. So the Gemara says, Kidesh Katani, it says he betrothed her, that's what you do. But Baal Katani, but it doesn't say if he actually had intercourse with them, which would imply that if he actually had intercourse, that he would have, according to Rabbi Tarfon, he would have to pay all 5 of them. Gazal Katani, it says if he stole, which implies Lakachol Katani, but if he just took it from them, he wouldn't have to pay anything according to Rabbi Kiva. So money must nisin. So who is our Mishnah like? It's not like either of the opinions in the next source that we're going to cite. Not like the Tana Kama or Rabbi Elazar. The Tanya, what does Rabbi Shimon Elazar say? Well, Nechaku Rabbi Tarfon Rabbi Akiva al Shei Kadesh achas mechamesh nashim. Ve'enu yodea ezer kiddush eminiach ksuba b'neinu mistalik. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon are not arguing in a situation where he betrothed one of the women and he doesn't know who it was, and then he puts the ksuba in front of them and leaves. Everybody agrees that under that circumstance, Rabbi Akiva would agree with Rabbi Tarfon. Amal nechaku, but according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, they're arguing about a case al Shabal where they actually had the intercourse. The Rabbi Tarfon says meniach ksuba b'neim. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, there Rabbi Tarfon says you put the one ksuba down and you leave, and Rabbi Akiva says ad sheyishalem kol achas v'achas. And there Rabbi Akiva says you have to pay each one. And also, And also, Rabbi Tarfon says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar did not argue about a case where they actually took it, Shalakach Mekach, where he took where he did a business deal and he took the money. He doesn't know from which one he took. There, everybody would say you have to put the money amongst them and leave. Even Rabbi Akiva would say that that's what you do. They're only arguing about a case where you stole from 5 people. Rabbi Tarfon says you just put the money there and leave. And Rabbi Akiva says, you have to pay each one. I mean, the Kamar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, but Kidesh v'lakach lo pligi. And from the fact that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says by a case of Kidesh and Lakach, Rabbi Akiva agrees that you just put one ksuba payment there and then you leave. We call the Tanakama Savar Pligi. So this proves that the Tanakama of that source, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is saying the Tanakama says they argue. So if that's the case, our Mishnah, which says that they argue in the case of Kidesh v'lakach, not just Kidesh v'gazal, it's not, who's our Mishnah like? The Gemara says, Olam Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. No, our, as it states, money. Who's our Mishnah like? Itanakama. If it's like Rabbi the Tanakama, list the Kidesh v'lakach. It should say Kidesh and purchase, not Kidesh and stole. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, list the Baal v'gazal. It should say if he had intercourse and stole. So the Gemara says no. Olam Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. My Kidesh, when it says Kidesh, our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon. When it says Kidesh, it doesn't mean betrothed, it means intercourse. Kidesh would be they betrothed through intercourse. And Tana Kidesh, Lodiach Kochod Rabbi Akiva, and it's teaching us Kidesh to tell us the strength of Rabbi Akiva's position. The Avagav, the Isur D'Rabbanan Avad, even though he did a rabbinic prohibition, Kanas, we penalize him and tell him and say that he has to. No, he has to mean to say that even though he violated just rabbinic prohibition, we still penalize him. He has to give each one. Vitana Gazal Odia Kochod Rabbi Tarfon, and we say theft to teach us the strength of Rabbi Tarfon's position. Dafagav Disur the Araisa of it, even though he stole, he doesn't penalize him. And say he only has to pay one and not all of them. Now up to the next Mishnah. This is the Mishnah we alluded to on Amud Aleph, which Bill was challenging. Let's say you have a Mishnah, you have a woman, she goes overseas. And her offspring is with them. And she comes and she says, my husband died, and then my son died, so I don't fall to Yibum. Then we believe her. And she doesn't fall to Yibum or Chalitza. So, but if she says, but if she says, my husband died, and then my son died, and then my husband died, we don't believe her. Meaning to say, we don't believe her that she has to do Yibum, but we're concerned that she might be correct. She does Chalitza and not Yibum. Let's say she says, let's say she says, I was given a son overseas, And she says, my son died, and then my husband died. Nemenes, because that's exactly the same status she had when she left. And she falls to Yibum. But if she says, Meis Bali V'akach Meis B'ni, she says, my husband died and then my son dies, ain't a nemenes, we don't believe her. Because Shilad Varah, and V'cholet is woman say Bemes. We make her do Chalitza, not Yibum. Let's say she says, Niten Li Yavam B'Medina Sayam. What she says, my mother-in-law gave birth to a son, and so now I have another brother overseas. And Amra Meis Bali V'akach Meis Yivami. And she says, my husband died, and then my Yavam died, and so now I'm free to marry, or Yevami V'akach Bali, Nemenes. She's going to be allowed to remarry in that case because she's the only one who told us about it. Let's say she went overseas with her husband and her brother-in-law. And then she says, my husband died, and then my Yavam, or Yevami V'akach Bali, ain't a Nemenes. Then we're not going to believe her in either case. A woman is not believed to say her brother-in-law has died, Shetina said, so that she could get married, because we're not going to believe her in that case to say her brother-in-law died. We only believe her about her husband. We also don't believe her when she says my sister died, so I can marry her husband. And the man is not believed to say my brother died, so I can marry his wife. And we're not believing him to say his wife died so he can marry her sister. So Bamine Rav Mir Rav Nachman. So now there's a principle that Zachar Adam Shalom B'fanav. You're allowed to accept something and act as an agent on behalf of somebody else if you know if it's for his benefit. Like if Reuben says to Shimon, I want to give $1 billion to Levi, will you accept it? So Levi will say, so Shimon will say, sure. But if Reuben will say to Shimon, here, I'm giving you this document to accept on Levi that he owes me $1 million, of course Shimon can't accept it there. He's obligating Levi without Levi's presence. But we know that if something Levi would for sure want, he could do it. So now the Gemara says, what about a get? Let's say a man's on his deathbed. And as he's dying, he knows his brother-in-law is not going to be able to do Yibam or Chalitza because his brother-in-law is like in Japan. He's not going to have to get there. Or he says maybe he knows his brother-in-law is a jerk. So somebody wants to give the get to his wife, but his wife's not there. So he wants to give it to an agent to accept on his wife because he can't do the get after death. So in this case, what are you going to do? Do we say that the agent can accept it on behalf of his wife? Do we say, given the Sanya, since she hates the brother-in-law, it's a merit for her to get the get, and so therefore he can accept it. And he can accept it on her behalf. Or maybe we say, given the Zimban derachmal, and sometimes once in a while she likes her brother-in-law. Therefore she prefer not to have the get. And we're not going to penalize the person not in his presence. Amarle, Tanina, we learned this at our Mishnah. Didn't we learn in our Mishnah? It said in the case of a Yavam, we say we have to be concerned about it. So since we're saying we have to be concerned, and Rashi points out that we say it in another case, in another sugya. Earlier in our Gemara, we have concern in the opposite direction. We see that it's not always the same thing. Sometimes she likes him, and so sometimes she doesn't. And so therefore, you can't have a hard and fast principle here. And so therefore, you can't accept it on her behalf. So Amalei can't accept it even though sometimes it's a merit. Yeah, because you don't know for sure. You don't know for sure. Amalei Ravina. And so therefore, if he gave it to her, to the man, since you don't know if it's a valid get, you have to do chalitza and not yibam in that case. But you need chalitza. Now we have another case. Let's say you want to give the get to the wife in a case where you want to give the get to the agent on behalf of the wife in a case where he's fighting with his wife. So the husband and wife are fighting. And now he says, you know what? Let me give you the get to the agent, and you accept it on her behalf. Do we say even this like a tata bade? Skutua, since she fights with the husband, for sure it's a merit for her to get the get. Odelma, nicha de gufa adafa. Even though she fights with him, she likes being married to him. She has some physical pleasure. Tashma damar Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish says. So Reish Lakish says, Tava meitav tandu milo meitav armelo. In Talmudic times, they have a principle, and the principle is now, unfortunately, some courts still apply this, but it's not really the case. Because what does the principle say? It's tova meitav. It's better to live tandu, two people together, milo meitav armelo. That the woman says, I'd rather live with another man, even though I don't like him so much, than to live as a widow. So therefore, even though there's a fight, that's not enough to accept, to assume she would want the get given to her. Abai says, another expression they used to say, Deshumshana Gavra, Kursaya Becharata Ramale, that even if her husband is small like an ant, she shows everybody his importance and she puts her seat amongst the distinguished women. And Rav Papa says, Dinavtza Gavra, even if her husband is combing wool, Tikri besipe bebava v'teisev. She sits at the entrance to the house to show everybody she's married. Meaning to say, she wants to be married even though it's not clear. Rav Ashi says, even though the guy's a loser. Rav Ashi says, the kol sagavra lo bai to l'kdera. Even if her husband has a blemish in his family, she wants to stay married to him so she could be considered married, even if he only gives her lentils. And ton of akuan mezanos v'tolos b'balein. And then the Gemara concludes all of these women. It's not really true. That's just what they claim, because they really just want to assume that they're married to this guy who's a loser, so that they go out, have adultery, and have a different child from somebody else, and then attribute it to him. So anyway, that's the Gemara's sociology. Hadron alacha isha shalom. And tonight at 6:45 is mincha, and then we're going to continue with